But I wanted to ask you this, Colonel Wilkerson. In Kennedy's speech, he referred to Soviet propaganda at the time, saying that they believe that there are forces in the West that would like a preemptive war and would also want to enslave Europe. And I think today there are such forces. I don't think it's simply propaganda. I don't think everybody, but there are forces, if push comes to shove, would prefer that to sitting down and negotiate. So the question is, how do we rally people for immediate negotiations against this threat of nuclear war? Because I don't believe most Americans want a nuclear showdown. And I think if they saw leadership, it's not coming from the White House or from the candidates, it's got to come from somewhere else.
Well, there's two angles on this that really trouble me right now. And the group I was with yesterday, we had military professionals, we had a conversation about this. One is that we know the condition of America's armed forces right now. And despite the fact that they've been getting close to $1 trillion every year for almost a decade, that money has gone principally to two things. Half of it has gone to contractors, and another half of it has gone to pay the enormously expensive all-volunteer force to stay in existence. That's everything from $100,000 bonuses to you name it for keeping people in, and they still can't recruit enough. So, for example, I'll just give you a couple. The carrier Eisenhower just pulled out of the Red Sea after 9 months. Those boys and girls hadn't been home to Norfolk in 9 months. That's a hell of a long deployment. There's no ship to replace her. And if there were, we're not sure it could sail because we don't have enough crew to complement her. We are so short people in the reserve components that we could not mobilize if we tried. We'd have to go to a full draft overnight. Imagine what that would do to the country. We all agreed in this group that half of the people of draftable age between 18 and 24, say, would be across the Mexican or the Canadian border within 48 hours. And that was a dramatic statement by one of the general officers present, but he's probably close to being correct. Bringing it on that way and also drafting women. So that's the first answer. Our armed forces are really in sad shape. Now, the second answer is I think the administration is backing that fact up, because I refuse to think that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, or even Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, is lying blatantly to the President of the United States. And even if the President is incapacitated and can't understand what they tell him, then certainly Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and others can. So that leads me to the conclusion that they're depending on nuclear weapons, that ultimately they think they can bluff their way through the Ukraine conflict, bluff their way through the Middle East conflict, bluff their way through anything else, like, for example, Taiwan and the South China Sea, because we have nuclear weapons, which means to me that they don't understand nuclear theory, escalatory theory, if you will. Thinking you can bluff your way through with a miserably incompetent lower level conventional military with the backdrop of nuclear weapons is to invite a nuclear exchange. I mean, all the theorists during the Cold War pointed that out. It's one reason why Kennedy said what he said about you never want to have two nuclear powers at war with each other. And we really are in Ukraine. And if Putin's declaration of a no-fly zone over the Black Sea includes shooting down U.S. warplanes that are providing intelligence to Ukraine, we are truly at war. And what are we backing that up with? Nuclear weapons. I think Putin has come to begin to understand that to a certain degree because he's got good intelligence too. And so he's being awfully careful about his escalations, which really troubles me about this one. I hope it's not inclusive of shooting down manned aircraft, maybe shooting down drones and other unmanned aircraft, but I hope it doesn't include shooting down manned aircraft, because Biden is going to take that, I think, as an act of war, and we're going to be at war with another nuclear power, a verboten thing. And then the third part of the answer is there are some real threats in the world to what I would call U.S. vital national security interests. They don't in any way, fashion, or form gravitate towards the way or the people or the states that are expressed as those threats. But there are some real threats. One of them is the climate crisis. And we're not dealing with it in any real way except on the surface, particularly with regard to emissions. We are going to reach 2 degrees very shortly. And 2 degrees is going to be a hard world to live in. 3 degrees is going to be almost impossible, and 4 will die. We're headed that way by mid-century. So we've got these colossal threats that we're confronting, not to even mention the fact we've destroyed all the nuclear weapons treaties and need to get back to them. And yet we're being focused on these threats that are down in front of us that are really about U.S. hegemony. That's what Ukraine is about. U.S. hegemony. We feel like our hegemony over Europe and over 740 million, 500 million, if you subtract the Russians, is being threatened. We felt like Germany was growing too strong as an economic power. We felt like, why else would you take out Nord Stream pipeline? We did that. We did that, and we knew what it would do to Germany's economy. We did it intentionally, not just to break Germany away from the Russians and their energy profile, but to actually hurt Germany's economy, which we have done. Look at the elections that are happening now and there. Germany will be the next one to fold. France has already folded. Germany will be the next one to fold. Look at the only sane voice in Europe right now. The only sane voice in Europe, if we count Russia out of Europe, which I don't do, a map puts them in Europe, but let's put Putin over there in Moscow. The only sane voice in Europe is Orban, Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban sounds today like Winston Churchill did in 38 and 39 with respect to Germany. Viktor Orban is telling us we are creating a nightmare in the heart of Europe. He's the only one telling the truth. The Secretary General of NATO is not. The new one is probably going to be worse than him, I'm told. We have new members of NATO. The alliance is so unwieldy now, it could fall apart at any moment. Its southern flank, anchored by the largest and most effective land army in NATO, Turkey's, is about to leave, I think. Erdogan just waiting to give his middle finger to the European Union, which has been giving its middle finger to him for 20 years about joining the EU. These are desperate times, and we are making up for the desperation with our nuclear shield. That's my calculation, and that's a very dangerous thing to be doing.
Okay, thank you.